Welcome, everybody, to the first instalment of Steer's Election Reflection Series, where we're bringing together industry experts for a bit of a 30-minute chat, a bit of a conversation around the impact of Labour's agenda across cities, transport, infrastructure, from what we've heard about so far. My name's Simon Statham. I'm a director at Steer. Just to note, you'll be able to find recordings of this session and all the other sessions coming up on our website, steergroup.com. It's also worth noting that these will be subtitled. You will be able to use the comment section to share views and generate a conversation with other participants. However, unfortunately, due to the condensed nature of the session, it's only about 30 minutes long. Maria and I won't, unfortunately, be able to kind of answer questions live, but we might be able to take them away and answer them after the session. So thank you for joining us today in this conversation. I'm very grateful to be joined by Maria Machancoses, CEO of Midlands Connect. For those who don't know, Midlands Connect research, develop and progress transport projects that provide biggest possible social, economic and environmental benefits for the region. Now, Maria is celebrating 10 years at Midlands Connect this year. She's been there from the very kernel of an idea. She set up the partnership in the first place. She's been very much the one that's kept it together over that period of time. And she's seen that organisation blossom into a really vital strategic planning body for the region. So welcome, Maria.
Thank you, Simon. It's good to be here. It's good to see you.
Yeah, so full disclosure, Maria and I worked together. So I was at Midlands Connect for about 7 of those 10 years. I've obviously seen firsthand the important work that she did, bringing that region, the Midlands region, together to speak as one voice. Not an easy job, and Maria's done it fantastically.
Simon, you've been extremely nice. You were part of that too. You were very part of it, and you were, really important player. You help a lot in that process. So let's give ourselves credit to both of us. And we should be proud of that.
We'll share in that then. So maybe as a bit of an icebreaker, Maria, but a bit of a kind of a kickoff. Maybe you could reflect on those 10 years at Midlands Connect and subnational transport bodies in general. So what do we think is the biggest change from then to now?
When you told me we were doing this session, I thought, okay, what has been the big change? And when I first was asked to think about Midlands Connect, and hopefully people will relate to this, there was a massive thing going on in the north. At that time, I think it was George Osborne, and he was really making a big difference in terms of creating a voice for the north. The north who never seemed to get the investment that it deserves, that it was abandoned, nobody thought about it. And the whole Northern Powerhouse sort of phenomena came in. And at that time, the regional development agencies were also on the way out, if not already. So there was this tension going on in the Midlands. We didn't know how to go about that, because in the Midlands, you had the West and the East Midlands, and you have this almighty North shouting and making a big point about how important, quite rightly, the North was for the UK, and that they kept being felt like government, Whitehall, were not looking, they were not listening to the North. So for when I was told, we need to do a similar thing, can we not do something similar so we can create a voice for the Midlands? Those kind of principles of where does the Midlands feature in government thinking? Where are those decisions in terms of big investment priorities featuring in ministers and in number 10, in number 11 in Treasury? That's what really made Midlands going to happen. The leaders saying we really need to come together and speak with one voice. It's interesting how throughout the last 10 years, this idea of Whitehall and the UK remains hugely centralised, and we're now moving into a more supportive framework for devolution and going and zooming into combined authorities, and the rise of the combined authorities, I think, has been fantastic. But obviously, always makes you think, therefore, where does the North and the Midlands and the work that we were doing at that strategic level feature with all of this? So there's always been a change. That as Midlands Connect, I think we have been very good at resilient in terms of adapting to those new landscapes and the views of how government wants to engage and have conversations and negotiate with different parts of the country. So that's probably what's kept me going and has made Midlands Connect, I think, the organization that it is, that ability for leaders to start always willing to collaborate, no matter what happens at local level, to engage with government.
Yeah, I remember that there was never a steady state at Midlands Connect when I was there. There was never a period where you thought, yeah, well, we know what we're doing now, we can just carry on. Yeah. The landscape changed politically. What government and the region were asking of the subnational transport bodies was constantly evolving, constantly changing. So really interesting times.
Yeah.
So let's get on to the kind of the meat, I suppose, of why we're really here. So I'll start off with something that I noticed in the Labour's manifesto. So tucked away in the manifesto, on page 34, for those who are particularly interested, there's a kind of a little throwaway line where they say they want to develop a long-term strategy for transport. Now, I remember, again, when we were working together, there was quite a lot of talk within subnational transport bodies about the need for a national transport strategy. There were different views of that. I remember I was a bit sceptical that we did need it. There were others in subnational transport bodies that were really adamant that it was vitally important. So do you think that kind of little chuck away one line, have you heard anything more? Do you think that is the much fabled national transport strategy?
I personally think it's a good thing. It's how you go about it that matters. And, as everybody who knows, there's a national transport body, the number one mandate from government was to develop a transport strategy for the region, for the area that they serve. So when this whole idea of a national transport strategy came in, yes, it would be very easy for us in STBs to say, just glue the 7 together and presto, you got a national strategy. That would be a very straightforward thing, wouldn't it? But I don't think so. I think personally, this country, as a country, you got Scotland has got a Transport for Scotland massive strategy worth looking at, actually, for those who have not seen it. The same in England itself hasn't got one, and businesses, because we in transport always think, well, we know how to go about things, but when you're trying to tell the direction of travel of policy for a country in terms of where is it going to invest, where is it going to what kind of technology is going to back, what type of activities you're going to see in the next 5-10 years, 10, 15, 20 years, because that's the sort of thing that businesses need. And we need to think about movements for the nation, not just for one area. So we need to really embrace the multimodal and integrated transport for the whole country, where everybody knows where we're going, where's the direction of travel in terms of policy, in terms of technology, and set it clear. It doesn't have to be granular. I think the secret is don't make it too specific and don't do a blanket approach. And that's hopefully when STBs can help. You set the direction of travel, and the STBs and the local authorities can then start to implement it. Yeah,
I mean, I've definitely warmed to the idea of a need, but just playing devil's advocate for a minute, there are lots of strategies and plans and so on already in place. We've obviously got the decarbonisation plan, transport decarbonisation plan. We've got Bus Back Better. We've got national infrastructure strategy, as you mentioned. We've now got 7 subnational transport bodies with regional strategies. We've got mayoral combined authorities that have got strategies. So where does a national transport strategy fit in if that's where Labour want to go?
It's a great question, Simon, because there's 2 things we need to consider here. It's what weight will they carry, but so back to your initial point, you at the moment have got a RIS strategy, a road investment strategy from National Highways. Those are 5-year funded programs. Everybody knows what's going to happen. They stick to it. But the railways happen elsewhere. We don't know, actually. That's been an area that, between you and I, has been always great, hasn't it? Yeah. To know and to see the pipeline of railway investment has always been tricky. But but therefore how they both combine, how do they work together? And that integration multimodal approach to a transport network is just so difficult to combine. And then with transport, you go a whole energy sort of debate now, aren't you? You want to decarbonize, how it all fits with energy. So you're right, there are different strategies. And in fact, the one thing we not mention is that they also mention the need, Labour are introducing a 10-year infrastructure plan.
Yeah.
So how all of this is going to come and come together is going to be very, very interesting. And I guess the most important thing here is what weight will it have? Will it have a funding program associated with it? Or is it just a grand vision for future direction of travel in this country? Will it be messed about and any minister can come in later and change his mind? And because that's the problem that hopefully you agree we have been experiencing for years. You think there's a pipeline, you think there's a commitment, and it's changed.
Yeah, we did go through many secretaries of state when we were working together. I don't think they left because of us, but you never know. So you also mentioned earlier that one way of looking at a national transport strategy is that we have 7 regional strategies. Let's just stitch them together. So that's probably not that practical. But what role do you want? What role does Midlands Connect want or need in that work? You don't want it to happen to you, do you? You want to be part of that national transport strategy. How do you think you can, convince the ministers to kind of bring subnational transport bodies into the tent on that?
So that's gonna be the big million question this year. As I said, because there's one thing that Labour, the new government, have introduced. It's a massive emphasis on devolution, and we think it's a good thing. But it's where do they see the STBs helping in terms of balancing between national and local? It's going to be very, very important. And the STBs are, I think the point that we're making is you cannot go from central to local in that, in that manner. We work with local authorities, we work with combined authorities and start to create a layer. That's what we call subnational, I guess, which, although I do not like the name, it kind of makes sense because it's when all the local thinking and all the transport starts to happen combined and you start to integrate it, and presto, you can start negotiating what you want the national network to do, and to do it in a place-based approach rather than just a network approach, which is perhaps the biggest added value that we bring to our work. We don't think of the railways as a railway kit. We think of it with a purpose to support housing growth and so on. So we're hoping that there'll be this government in particular will see the benefit of that pan-regional approach to informing national thinking.
Very good, very interesting. Like you say, exciting times for STBs to be potentially involved in that kind of work. So let's go from kind of national to a bit more local now. The other thing that Labour's been talking about quite a lot is mentioned in the manifesto, but they've also talked about it since they've come to power in the last few weeks, is kind of localised devolution. We've had all the existing mayors taking selfies on the steps of number 10. So it's obviously prominent in Labour's vision for how to devolve. They want more mayoral combined authorities. They want more mayors to come forward. They want to devolve power down to not necessarily down to combined authorities, to individual authorities as well. They're talking about giving powers to any local authority to run their own bus services, if they want to, for example, and not just in combined authorities. So where does, in this kind of ever expanding kind of devolution, evolution, where does Midlands Connect fit in? Where do you fit in now? How do you work with, you've been working with one mayor in particular in the West Midlands, but now you've got a new mayor coming forward in the East Midlands and another one potentially in Lincolnshire coming forward. How do you fit in at the moment? How do you work with those mayors?
Well, we are being extremely pleased with the arrival of these two mayors in particular. We don't have a mayor in Lincolnshire, as you said, yet. But that's the first question everybody asks, is that why we still need a Midlands Connect? And we were totally reassured with how the mayors understand that devolution is great, and they are laser focused on making sure that those Devo deals materialize as quickly as possible. What I like about this particular mayors is that huge appetite to deliver as soon as possible for the people, rather than keep talking and promising. I have seen a different energy this year. This is about, I really need to make a difference in the next 4 years. Let's just concentrate on what can we do that really has a positive impact quickly on people's lives and so on. So it was quite reassuring in that way, because they genuinely understand that they got an economic geography, an area where they want to invest. Inclusion, placemaking, and local bosses, for instance, can have a phenomenal role and transformational role if they're given the right tools to really improve how people can get to jobs, to health, to all the types of places. But they do understand that they cannot be parochial, and they need to understand that for those combined authority areas to be competitive and thrive in a bigger national and international arena, they do need those strategic connections, the strategic agenda with how they collaborate with others around them. And that, in fact, businesses don't really acknowledge those geographies or those boundaries. So I've been, so far, I have to say, extremely happy with how our mayors have gone about Midlands Connect. It's really important. We want to be part of this kind of thing.
Yeah, I remember we did have some very useful collaborations on individual projects, particularly where they kind of aligned, where our priorities aligned, and that did work really, really well. So we're
actually, Simon, on that, I'll give you credit, because the one thing that you brought into Midlands Connect is this concept of corridors, if you remember. And those corridors were well beyond boundaries of any local authority, and all of them were talking about them, weren't they? If you think about it, they were all trying to get those businesses to invest in those corridors and so on. So this is what I think that's the added value that we bring. It's we make people realize that when it comes to transport, you've got to understand movements and the trends and where people want to go and so on. So I'm hoping that appetite for the strategic conversations will still happen.
And again, with Labour concentrating or making quite a lot of noises around devolution and kind of cascading powers down and so on, is Midlands Connect going to be after a slice of that Devo pie? What's your ambition going on into the future?
It's a really nice way to ask a very, very difficult question, Simon. So it's at the moment, that's my personal view. Government is doing really well in trying to bring a lot of emphasis and pace around the local devolution agenda. I think you saw even the Deputy Prime Minister reaching out to all local authorities and said, if you want to be part of this the devolution agenda, apply for it. We are ready to give it to you. So then there's also the whole bus reform and the bill. There's a lot of activities in there in government, including the new infrastructure body. The appetite for greater devolution is going to be interesting, and whether they want to do it at this level, it's something that we're going to have to obviously engage, because you don't know what the government's thinking is around this at the moment. But from a Midlands Connect perspective, we want to make sure that our local authorities get all the support they need at the moment, because, as you know, there's a lot to do, and some of them actually haven't got even the resource to drive things forward. So given the agenda that this government got for the next year or two, we'll rather concentrate on making things easier so we can get as much investment as possible.
Yeah. So when early days of Midlands Connect, there was talk and discussion in the partnership about getting statutory powers in the same way that Transport for the North have statutory powers. The only subnational transport body to have statutory powers. And I think we went through a bit of a roller coaster at the time, didn't we? Both internally within the organisation, but also within the partnership. There were some within the partnership that were pushing for statutory powers, some within the partnership that were quite adamantly against it, and others who were a bit more kind of neutral. And I remember that we settled on, as a partnership, actually, we don't think we need statutory powers to do the job that our partnership and the DFT have asked us to do. And so I guess until that changes, until that kind of role and function of a subnational transport body actually changes, the need for statutory powers for someone like Midlands Connect is maybe slightly lessened. But I suppose maybe that's a conversation that you're going to continue to have with the new government about what the role and function of subnational transport bodies needs to be.
Absolutely, and the best thing that Midlands Connect did was to listen, because at that time when all that debate was happening, and again it was all about Transport for the Northeast, why aren't you, but there was a lot of pressure, wasn't it, in terms of us sort of wanted to become an equal influencer and an equal player as Transport for the North. And but again, to your point, when we dig deep in terms of what powers are we after, those powers, the region was saying, well, you can do that without becoming a statutory. Now, I think the debate at the moment this is what I was saying, what is the appetite for a new government to devolve powers? Because obviously some powers you can devolve locally, some powers, and the whole purpose of some national transport bodies was to devolve powers that at the moment sit within the Secretary of State for Transport. And therefore, we need to have that conversation. Is there an appetite for that or not? And if there isn't, and even when there is, what does that mean with the devolution agenda locally? And so the way we're going about it actually is Midlands Connect. We're just about to start a piece of work that hopefully will be helpful to everybody, because this is all about providing clarity. It's actually going to say, look at the evolving landscape, particularly of the Midlands, and also look at what's happening with the rail reform and the introduction of GBR, which no doubt will have powers around the railway itself. So let's look at that and let's understand what are the possibilities, opportunities of Midlands Connect as a some national transport body moving forward. That could involve exploring a statutory, or actually could say, what, at the moment there's no need for that. Still, we can still be as influential as we are in the current setup. So that's what we're doing.
So let's, for the last couple of minutes before we need to wrap up, Maria, let's pick on something else that I noticed in the manifesto. There's a promise in there to accelerate infrastructure delivery. So they talk about, Labour talks about in there that big infrastructure in particular takes too long to come forward, to be delivered. The case of HS2, it took so long to come forward and be delivered that it wasn't delivered, and people changed their minds. So do you think it's really possible to accelerate major infrastructure? What's holding it back now? What are the barriers as you see it?
Well, I mean, if they want to have some practical examples, they should come to the Midlands straight away, shouldn't they, Simon? I mean, you're right. HS2, we shouldn't just say that's it, done. We're just going to get on with phase one and forget about it. There's so much to learn from that project in the way it was planned, developed, and then the whole approval process. I think there is huge amount of things you could do to make things much easier. We generally are one of the worst performing countries when it comes to infrastructure delivery, and it's a shame because we got the best engineers and we got the best people that actually we export across the globe. I know we do. So what's happening in here? So you know very well, with the Midlands Rail Hub, it's also been very challenging. How long it took for decisions to be made after all the information was submitted. So it's not so much about, the planning system. It's actually the whole approval, the pace around focusing on one project and taking it through the all stages at pace rather than, but I guess the political angle is also quite important. Political interference with big schemes can really make a difference as well in terms of the delays and so on. So yes, there's lots to learn. I think there's massive opportunity. If there's a government who's serious about infrastructure delivery and the amount of savings you could create because of that efficiencies, there's huge opportunities. And I will ask anybody who's watching or listening to us, if they would like to hear the perfect examples, come to the Midlands, because we got bags of them, and we're really determined to, hopefully, the work that we're doing with the Rail Hub and our colleagues in Network Rail and the department and West Midlands Rail Executive, I think that's a good model to look at in terms of how we're working together.
Yeah, I remember as you point out, the kind of the early stages of the Midlands Rail Hub. For those who don't know, it's a kind of £2 billion piece of rail infrastructure that kind of connects the East and the West Midlands together, albeit the infrastructure itself is in and around central Birmingham. You're today. The stage of development, so purely moving from strategic outline business case to outline business case or decision to proceed, let's say, that took more than a year from Midlands Connect and Network Rail submitting a business case to deciding just to move on to the next stage of the business case. And admittedly, there's big sums of money involved. Don't get me wrong. It was a decision to spend £20 million on an outline business case, and scrutiny needs to be given to that, and the right decision needs to be made. But for that kind of project, it was a no-brainer. And yet it still took over a year for a decision to be made. And in that time, the team in Network Rail lost some of its momentum. It lost some of its people that had been working on the project to other projects. Quite rightly, they're not sitting around for a year, twiddling their thumbs, waiting to move on. So there are definitely chunks of time in the development process that, if we really wanted to speed up development of and delivery of infrastructure, we really could. So do you see? We've got another minute or so before we need to start to kind of wrap up. One of the things they explicitly talk about is accelerating the rollout of electric vehicle infrastructure. And I know from my time at Midlands Connect that you've got a big role in the kind of the coordination of, let's say, publicly funded EV infrastructure, and the kind of the gap where the public sector needs to kind of fill in. So from the work that Midlands Connect's been doing over the last few years, and in particular since I've left, actually, so I don't really know the answer to this one, but what do you see as the challenges of accelerating infrastructure, that EV infrastructure, particularly the stuff that's funded by the public sector?
It's been a phenomenal journey for the team in Midlands Connect, and I give credit to Barrett and Heather, you know them well, but also the local authorities. It's very, very easy. Back to your point about how we go about delivering infrastructure, it's very, very easy to announce and to allocate funding, but on new areas such as this, where you need to very quickly identify locations, connect to the grid, get all of those planning in places, to make sure that everybody gives consent at really local level. It's not easy. And they have to, that's when I think that was the added value that Midlands Connect brought. All the local authorities were pulling their hair, it's like, this is just not as straightforward as everybody thinks, particularly for those, as you say, public sector funding tends to target those areas that are not commercially viable, as you know. So therefore, there's a bit more challenge in terms of there might not be the grid to connect to. These are really isolated, maybe rural areas. They haven't got infrastructure to even connect the EV points or whatever, but also about maintenance. Nobody thought about, once you put them in place, who's going to take care of this, right? And what are the skills? Have we got these people that actually can, if something goes wrong, who's going to take care of that? The repairs, the contracts. This is a 3-year contract where we only got funding for 2 years. What's going to happen afterwards? The local government have got no funding. I could go on and on. Hopefully you're sensing it was so easy. It was just super easy to say, we got lots of millions of pounds. We're going to put it all in place. So again, instead of, I'm not complaining, I'm just saying there's so much more we can do in terms of lessons learned, economies of scale. How do you go about contracts? Actually, the private sector are up for it, but it's all of these things. So we're all very excited. We're working extremely well together. But we need to sort of really do our lessons learned, and don't let these, competitive funding and all of these decisions on and off stop the massive amount of work that we do in a local level.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Maria. Massive thank you for joining us today and being, part of the conversation, as well as your dog that's under the table that had a bit of a
I'm
yap.
so sorry about that.
No, that's okay. No problem whatsoever.
Brings us back to old days in lockdown, but I do apologize.
Not a problem. For those still on, we've got further sessions coming up over the next few weeks. Some of them are on the screen, as you can see there. The next one in particular is tomorrow at 2:00. My colleague Matt Clark will be speaking to Toby Poston, the Director of Corporate Affairs at the British Vehicle Renting and Leasing Association. So hopefully that should be an interesting one again. And once again, a big thank you to Maria for your time today. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you, Simon, and thank you to Steer as well. Thanks, everyone.